Friedrich Merz is with me, the leader of the conservative CDU-CSU opposition in German parliament. Mr. Merz, you were in the room when Volodymyr Zelenskyy, Ukraine's president, was speaking. He received standing ovations. Also, the German chancellor was speaking today. What was your impression of the nature of the call of Volodymyr Zelenskyy for more support and the German chancellor's Germany's reaction to it?
Well, firsthand, my reaction was that he is extremely grateful to those who were in the room and giving support to Ukraine for almost 2 years now. On the other hand, he described the actual challenges in Ukraine with his people, and he asked for more support. And that is, in my view, still necessary. We have to give support to Ukraine, potentially for a longer period of time than we sought at the very beginning of this conflict.
In saying that, you're pretty much aligned with what the German government policy is to support Ukraine as long as necessary. Also, a new security agreement was signed this week, also with France and Ukraine. Now, the German chancellor basically cited the figures. Germany is spending 100 billion extra on defense. It spent some 30 billion or has committed them towards Ukraine. After the United States, it is the biggest supporter. What do you make of the role Germany is taking now, and what do you feel Germany should be doing in addition to that, particularly in rounding up support within the EU?
Well, our Chancellor gave an address to the nation 3 days after this terrible war began, on February 27 in 2022. And he had the big support of our country and our people and in Parliament. And he named it Zeitenwende, and he made the proposal to have an extra budget for 100 billion euros for our defense forces. And we agreed on that, and we put it into our constitution. So we had a 2/3 majority in Parliament to do that. And we are still in line with this policy of our government, and we are still supporting, and we are heavily supporting the government to help Ukraine and to equip our defense forces with military equipment, which is strongly needed. So we have to fill a gap, and we are actually doing that. But it is still time to do that. We don't have enough. And we have to increase our regular budget up to 2% of GDP. And that is a gap of roughly 25 billion euros per year. So the so-called Sondervermögen is a good thing, but there has more to follow to fill the gap, which is still between the actual budget and the 2% goal, which is roughly 80 billion per year.
You're also from the party that staunchly stands by the debt ceiling, the debt limit in Germany. So what would that mean for that provision?
Quite simple. Our budget, our federal budget alone is 475 billion euros per year. Our GDP is 4 trillion. So this economy is strong enough, and the tax revenues are big enough to have a defense budget of around 75 to 80 billion per year. And this does not mean that we have to do more debt. The indebtedness of our country is high enough, so we think that the regular budget is strong enough to do that.
Now, Donald Trump, who wants to get re-elected in the United States, is actually turning that German economic strength against the European continent, and he's using it in US politics. Now, at the moment, as we're recording this at the Munich Security Conference, that big aid package is still stuck in the US Congress. We heard one senator here from the Republican side basically saying, we'll get there in the end. Do you believe America will get there in the end? And if it doesn't, could Germany fill the gap?
Well, my meetings with our colleagues from the US Senate and the Congress made me very optimistic that there will be a solution in DC, and that the Americans will not withdraw from Europe, neither from their support to Ukraine. On the other hand, we have to do our homeworks here, and that is correctly said by Trump, and this is more friendly and more polite said by others, by Biden, that the Europeans have to do more for their own security, and that's the way we are going. We know that there is a lot to do still, but we are on this way, and we will go forward.
You are also accusing the German government at the moment, the governing coalition, of not doing its homework, particularly on keeping the German economy strong. It has one of the poorest outlooks amongst the major economies in the world. What action are you demanding that the government take?
Well, the figures are not as good as they should be. We are now in the second time only after the Second World War in a recession in 2 following years. So the first one was 2002 and 2003, and then we had the so-called Agenda 2010 from Gerhard Schröder. This time we are a second time in a recession, and we are demanding the government to put on the table an agenda for 2030, better for 2040. Our proposals is go to the labor market, go to the terrible bureaucracy in Germany, which is extremely high and complicated, go to our energy costs and go to tax burdens for our companies. This is the 4 most important measures which should be taken to increase our economy and to bring our economy up on track. There is a potential of roughly 1.5 or 2% growth. We are lacking behind that, and that's the reason why we are making these proposals.
I want to bring this back to the context of the war in Ukraine, because Volodymyr Zelenskyy, also you were in the room, was talking of populations that are psychologically not ready to face the real threat that Russia is, and that also the German Chancellor recognizes Russia is, that's a real threat. He said it was real today. What is the proposal of the leader of the opposition in changing the debate in Germany, or do you feel that that's something that's not necessary?
Well, changing the debate in Germany means changing the mood of the people. And we have to get our people convinced that our fight for freedom is still necessary and that we are not in a phase of our history where we can lean back and do nothing. So we have to do more. We have to spend more money on that. But my optimism is the following. Most of the Europeans have understood what has happened in Russia, not only 2 years ago, but also 8 years ago, 10 years ago, when they invaded Ukraine in 2014. And since then, the mood of the people has slowly, but it has changed. So on this basis, I think we can do practical politics, and we have to do that. And our priorities have to be renewed. And priority number 1 is keep the freedom of our people.
I just want to briefly at the end speak about the other conflict that could potentially really change maps, and it could change the lives of people everywhere around the world, which is in the Middle East right now. It is Israel's defense war in Gaza after that terror attack by Hamas on October 7th. We heard the Chinese foreign minister speak here today, and he was calling what was going on the longest lasting injustice. He also called for a 2-state solution, and he called on Israel to halt the fighting. You were recently in Israel. Where do you come down when it comes to the question also raised by the UN Secretary General here, who said it was indefensible what happened on October 7th, but he also, and I quote, said it was indefensible what was happening in Gaza right now?
We all want to see Israel taking care for the civilians. And when I talk to the Prime Minister, when I talk to the President, when I talk to Benny Gantz, who is part of the cabinet in Jerusalem, they all promised that they will do everything what they can do to protect the civilians. But on the other hand, they have to finalize their fight against the Hamas terrorists. And there are still 4,000 terrorists alive in the Gaza Strip. And they have to do that, and they have to fight that to an end. They will accept any longer the terrorism from the Gaza Strip, and that's their main goal. And I fully underscore what they are saying: protect the civilians, but fight terrorism in the Gaza Strip, so that this problem will never occur again.
So will you just take Israel's word for it that they are doing that? Because there are other voices, also the UN, criticizing that.
Look, Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. And I have no doubt that their leaders are trying to do the best for their people, and that they are knowing that they won't lose their friends on that way. And that's the reason why I'm trusting them. I'm talking to them behind closed doors, but I will never give public advices with a raised finger to the Israeli government. They have their own problems, they have to resolve it, and they deserve our full support.
Friedrich Merz, leader of the Conservative CDU, CSU opposition in the German parliament, thank you very much.
Thank you.